In this fourth section, I will cover the underlying dynamics of confidence and fear so that you can build a framework for understanding how to create a carefree state of mind when you trade. Okay, the next section that we're going to get into is exploring the dynamics of confidence and fear. In other words, what was from this morning and just a little while ago, not so much a little while ago, but especially from this morning, what's the primary problem? Why do we have so much of a problem, or what creates the problem in a trade-by-trade perspective? In other words, if I'm looking at the market, if my technical indicator gives me a signal to buy right now, okay, if I'm not predefining my risk, if I'm hesitating, if I'm jumping the gun, if I put my trade on and I want to move my stop, what is it that's going on right now? What's compelling me to make these kinds of errors? Fear. And what's behind the fear?
The possible negative mistakes that we've made in the past.
Okay, but that's good. Yeah, because you don't want to get tapped into being wrong, losing, missing out, all that pain. But remember, I said what was a universal characteristic of all humanity in terms of how we feel about our expectations being fulfilled?
Satisfaction.
Well, yeah, no, when they are. But what I'm saying is that it's because I'm expecting this trade to work. Okay, I want you guys got to get this. Okay, the reason why I'm having a problem is because I'm expecting this trade to work. This trade. It's not because I'm thinking that I've got a series of trades. Remember the pattern with flipping the coin? The pattern is that if I've got an edge, I'll give you another example. Let's say that I've got a coin that's weighted heavier on the tail side, so that it's going to come up on a percentage basis 65% of the time heads. And I get someone to take the other side of a bet where I get to call the flip every time. What am I going to do? Am I going to try to determine when tails is going to... 35% of the times tails is going to come up. I'm going to call heads every time. That's a pattern, okay? The way it relates here is that I've got a technical methodology that gives me winning trades, let's say 65% of the time. I don't know which of the next 20 trades or 25 trades that come up, I don't know which ones are going to be the winners and which ones are going to be the losers. If I'm going to trade my methodology appropriately, it really obligates me to take every single trade. I can't be picking and choosing my trades based on what I think is going to happen, because hopefully I've already established you don't know. And if you think you know, you're just making it up in your own mind. I'm going to repeat that. If you think you know, you're just making it up. Is everybody all right with what I just said?
Yes.
And so it obligates me to take every single trade that comes up, because I don't know which ones are going to be the winners and which ones are going to be the losers. It means that if I'm having problems, it's because I have a certain expectation about this trade, or about this trade, or about this one. So what if I'm expecting a random outcome? What if I change my expectations? Will I feel differently about it? If I change my expectations, will I feel differently about it?
Definitely.
Is there anybody in this room? Does anybody who trades? I don't think I've ever met anybody who trades who hasn't at least gambled at some point in their lives. Right? What do you expect when you put money into a slot machine and push the button? Good. Well, one of those answers was goodbye. I like that. What else? Loud. If anybody's going to say anything. What are you expecting? Really? On this one? Seriously. What do you expect? You know what you're expecting? You're expecting something to happen, right? You're expecting the wheels to turn. You're expecting something to show up. Now think about what I'm just saying. Because you know what? What I just said is exactly what I expect when I put on a trade. I'm expecting something to happen. I don't know what. But over a series of trades, if I do everything right, I'll make money. Because I'm managing my expectations on each one of these trades. I'm managing my expectations so that I do not have the potential to define and interpret these up and down ticks, the information the market gives me, in some sort of threatening or painful way. Because what I'm going to tell you, what we're going to get into now, is the effects of that. When you put money... What's that?
How realistic then is that 65% on your methodology?
What do you mean, how realistic?
It could be 70 or 80 or 50.
Go ahead. No, take the microphone.
How realistic is a 65% win ratio on your methodology?
I'm not understanding the question. How realistic is it?
Well, if you can't go by any individual specific trade, but you say over 20 trades, you can say you expect to win 65% of the time.
Correct. They're based on past performance.
Okay, but then again, looking at over any individual 20 or 50 sample, how realistic is maybe that 65% saying that that's a real number?
I'll find out. I don't know. I don't know. How will I know? How could I know? I'll find out. That's why you trade in sample sizes that are limited. In other words, I don't make an assessment of how well it's working until after the end of a sample size. If at the end of a sample size I get a high enough percentage of winning trades where I'm satisfied, then I'll take another sample size. If I don't, then I'll find ways to tweak my indicators to improve my results. So if you're to say, how realistic is it? I have no idea of knowing what's going to happen in the future. And when you get right down to it, it is possible. Would it not be possible for me to start a sample size that trade won and end up where every single one of them was a loser? Am I going to know that in advance? And see, and that's where paper trading is so critical, is that by paper trading, you will get a realistic assessment as to how well your edge works. And people have no problem paper trading. They'll paper trade to find out if their methodology works and to gain confidence in it. It's the other part that they won't participate in, meaning that they won't take a similar exercise to see how well their own psychology matches up to what they need to do to be consistently successful. In other words, to set up an exercise. Paper trading is an exercise, is it not? It's an exercise in developing skills, in understanding your methodology, is it not? So wouldn't it be just as reasonable to set up an exercise to learn how to execute properly, so you manage your expectations?
What do you consider a proper sample size?
20, 25 trades. I don't think it has to be more than that. I really don't. If it's not working within 25 trades, then there's something you're going to have to change. Okay, so it's all about our expectations. When I put money into a slot machine, I'm expecting something to happen. If it comes up a loser, do I get all worked up about this? Does this tap me into my accumulated emotional pain of every time I've been wrong and lost in my life? I mean, look at it. There are people who trade and because of their expectations, make every error in the book and can't make consistent money. And the reason why is because of because of their expectations. And yet, if they put money into a slot machine, where essentially the only difference between technical trading and a slot machine is the fact that with a slot machine, you have to put your money in first and then wait for a pattern to emerge. With technical trading, you have to wait for a pattern to emerge and then technically put your money on the line. The problem is because the way our minds think, we think that because the pattern emerged, that somehow or another it's giving us an edge on that particular individual trade. And there's just no way of knowing that. But over a series of trades, it does. So it's like technical analysis gives the individual the availability of being the casino. Technical analysis lets you own the slot machine because you've got the odds in your favor. The casino makes the slot machine available to us because they've got the odds in their favor. But to derive the benefit of those odds, you have to be able to execute properly. And you have to think about this properly. It is just a numbers game based on the odds. That means that you can't put an extraordinary, let's say an extraordinary amount of significance on each individual trade. Because if you sat and played a slot machine, you wouldn't think anything of it. If you played a dollar slot machine and you sat down with the idea that, you know what, I got $100 in my pocket, and you didn't win, you might have, let's say 10 times in a row you didn't win, you're still going to push the button. Because eventually you think, eventually I'm going to hit. Eventually I'm going to hit, so it's all right. You see, it's all right. Same thing here. This trade didn't work. Well, eventually I'll get a winner. This trade didn't work. Eventually I'll get a winner. This trade didn't work. Well, eventually I'll get a winner. Well, I don't know about this next one now. And that's almost always the winner. Now, if it turns out that your methodology has diminished in its, let's say, in its capacity to produce a winning percentage, because the underlying nature of the market is changing in relationship to this fixed formula, then, that's why you trade in smaller sample sizes, or a sample size where you don't lose an inordinate amount of money to find out it's not working. But you do this right, and you're the casino. Regardless of all the dynamic traders, regardless of all this other stuff I'm talking about, it doesn't matter. None of that stuff's important. As long as you understand as long as you understand how the underlying dynamics relates to the formula, so that you don't put an extraordinary amount of significance on a formula that's just giving you a pattern in collective behavior, not individual behavior. And it's individuals who move the market. So those individuals, there can always be an individual or group of individuals who come into the market that do something that completely negates the outcome of your pattern. And that's all right, because there's no way to know that in advance. It's all right. When you look at it that way, then you won't get all worked up. Then it's just a random outcome, just like a slot machine. It's just a random outcome. Because that's what you're expecting. You expect a random outcome, you got a random outcome, and there's no emotional significance. Because here's what happens when you don't look at it this way. Let's take a typical trader who's operating out of the 4 fears. Okay, we got support, we got resistance, we got a nice trading range. The market's coming down to support. Okay? Now, the typical trader operating out of those 4 fears, the fear of being wrong, the fear of losing money, missing out, depending on the intensity of these fears in a given moment, he might have a hard time putting that trade on. Right? He's got a viable pattern. All that happened here is that when the market, he had an imbalance in conviction. Remember, all price movements are a result of an imbalance in conviction. The markets came down to this point right here. There wasn't one person in the world, not one, now I'm going to say this, not one person in the world, in the whole world, that would take out the bids to offer this market one tick lower than this price right here. Not one. Okay? And then all of a sudden there's an imbalance in conviction where there are more buy orders than sell orders. It drives the price up to here, and the same thing happens. Drives the price down to here. Same thing happens here, here. Now it's coming back down. Now, from my perspective, I'm looking at it like this. How much room do I have to give the market to tell me that the people who bought here and the people who bought here are going to come back into the market and do it again. Because right now there's an imbalance in conviction on the sell side. That means that enough orders, buy orders, have to come into the market to absorb all the offers, to absorb all those offers, with enough left over to create upside movement. Do I have any way of knowing whether or not they're going to come in? No, I don't. But the odds are in my favor. At least I hope they are. In any case, I'm willing to risk a certain amount of distance from my entry point to find out. That's all it means to me. If they don't come in, it means, you know what, the guys that bought here and bought here, they might be out to lunch. And that happens. I am not kidding you. I know that for a fact. I've experienced it. Because I intimately knew, a lot of the big traders in certain markets that would buy here, and I'm thinking, okay, they're coming back in, and they were out to lunch. Say, hey, where were you guys? But to the typical trader that doesn't think this way, what's going to happen? If he manages to get the trade on, it's going to be because he thinks he's right. It's because he thinks he knows what's going to happen next. Right? And he's not going to put in a stop, because to predefine his risk, how much money does he have to, how much room and dollar-wise, how much room, distance, of the dollar value of this distance that he has to give the market to tell him that this trade is either working or it's not. Or that to let it go any further isn't worth finding out. That's all it means to me. But he's not going to think that way. He's going to think, by gathering evidence, that this trade might not work. He might be talking himself out of taking it. And so by the time he actually manages to get this order in the market and buy somewhere in here, he has convinced himself that he's right. Now remember I said earlier, and I think I just said it once so you might not have gotten it, that fear has an effect on the way we perceive information. When we're in a state of mind of fear, we are perceiving information in a threatening way. In other words, we're having an expectation of pain. And remember I said that to experience emotional pain, there's two kinds of pain: physical pain and emotional pain. Emotional pain requires an interpretation. The up and down ticks that the market offers us are not inherently pleasurable or painful by their nature. There is such a thing as painful information. I mean, painful from the environment's perspective. If someone's hurling insults at you, their intent is to cause you emotional pain. But that doesn't mean you're going to experience the emotional pain unless you interpret it that way. If they're hurling insults at you in a foreign language that you don't have the slightest idea about what they're saying, it may look to you like they're saying something that isn't so nice, but then again, you don't know what the words are, and so what do you feel? Nothing. The interpretations come from our beliefs. The interpretations come from our mental framework. In other words, the pain's already inside of us. All the words are doing is tapping us into it. Once we learn how to manage our interpretations, we can manage the way that we feel. We can actually determine how we feel in our own state of mind. So this trader, he's operating out of a fear of being wrong. So, like I said, he convinces himself that he's right. That's the way he gets the trade on. So let's say the market... Now, I said that fear causes us to focus on the object of our fear, so that we end up creating the very experience we're trying to avoid. This trader is trying to avoid being wrong. Now, we have self-protective mechanisms. They can work at an unconscious level. There are mechanisms inside of us that will protect us from information that we perceive as threatening. It causes what is typically referred to as perceptual blindness, where there are things going on around us that we cannot perceive, even though we have the ability to perceive it, but we're being blinded from it. if I'm afraid of being wrong, what of the information that the market is making available to me, what am I going to focus my attention on, the upticks or the downticks? You're right, the upticks, not the downticks. Meaning that what I will do is I will place an inordinate amount of significance. In other words, the way my mind will automatically weigh this information in terms of what's significant and what isn't, it will give more significance to the upticks than the downticks. Because every time I get an uptick, it will be taking me out of my pain. I'll say, oh, it's finally all over. And then we'll get more downticks. And then we get a couple upticks and say, oh, it's finally all over. In other words, what my mind is doing to protect me is saying that these few upticks are far more significant than all these downticks. Now, do I have the ability to recognize a trend? In other words, being able to define and recognize a trend is one of the most fundamental characteristics of learning technical analysis. A trend is a series of higher highs and higher lows, or lower highs and lower lows. But in this moment, am I able to recognize this as a trend? No, because I'm too focused on getting myself out of the pain, which means that I'm focused on these upticks. Now, our traders operating both out of a fear of being wrong and a fear of losing money. Now, what ends up happening is this, is that if this were to represent all the negative energy inside of his mind of what it means to be wrong, there's also negative energy inside of his mind about what it means to lose. And as the market moves further and further against his position, his belief about losing will start to gain more and more significance and start to rise to the forefront of his consciousness and make itself known, make its presence known, until finally he gets to a point where he cannot stand losing one more dollar. And that one more dollar, in essence, is when the pain of losing one more dollar is 1 degree greater than the pain of admitting that he's wrong. In other words, when this pain is greater than that pain by 1 degree, he'll get out of the trade. That's when he'll admit that it's a losing trade and get out. You guys with me on this? Now, he would say that the market did this to him. But what I'm saying is that is blatantly not the case. His fear did that to him. He created the very experience he was trying to avoid. He was trying to avoid being wrong, and he made himself wrong. And ultimately, this is always the spot where the market, where the market does that anyway. You guys with me on this? Okay, now this trader gets out of this trade right here. He looks back at this chart pattern and why didn't I just go short? Why didn't I just go short? The ability to recognize this as a downtrend, or let's say he was blinded from his ability to recognize this as a downtrend. The distinction existed inside of his mind. In other words, he can actually make the distinction of what a downtrend is. But in that moment, while he was in that trade, he was blinded to his own distinctions. Because he was operating out of a trade-by-trade mentality. He was operating out of a trade-by-trade mentality. This trade took on the significance of life or death, just like any other trade that he puts on does. And to be a consistently successful trader, it ain't going to happen if you think that way. The pros don't think that way. Determine your risk. It either works or it doesn't, and go to the next trade. Determine your risk. It works or it doesn't, go to the next trade. That's all it is. That's the whole game. Now, let's say that this doesn't happen, but this happens. Let's say instead of it going against him, that the market does this. Now what ticks do you think he's going to be focused on, the up or the down ticks? The market's doing exactly what he wants, by the way. Now the market is doing exactly what he wants. And what ticks do you think he's going to be focused on? The down ticks. And why the down ticks? Because he's been in too many times of trades where the market has taken away his profits. And so he places an inordinate amount of significance on every down tick, and in essence ends up doing what? Leaving money on the table. So what he does is, let's say he gets out right here, so he cuts his profit shorts and lets his losses run. In Chicago vernacular, this is called shitting like an elephant and eating like a bird. What's that? Now, if this trader had a belief in a random outcome, that he didn't have to know what was going to happen next to make money, would he have these problems? What would he be expecting if he had a belief in a random outcome? That there was just a random distribution between wins and losses on any given set of variables that defined his edge. If he believed that, if he believed that it only took one trader somewhere in the world to negate the positive outcome of his edge, if he believed that no matter what reason he thinks he has for putting on that trade, that the reason why it works or it doesn't work will almost never correlate to the actual reason that he conjured up, if he believed all these things, how would he be handling this? Come on, how would he be handling it? Tell me.
Well, he would have a plan, or in my words, I like to use the word strategy.
Okay.
When he got into the trade, he's going to say that, okay, when it reaches this level right here, I'm going to get out. If it goes down to this level down here, I'm going to get out. Now, he may have ended up leaving some money on the table, but at least he's going to be in that percentage that he had already predetermined that's going to create him to be a winning percentage of trades.
Would he have be saddled with the same emotional problems that he had if he was operating out of a fear of being wrong or losing money?
No, because he didn't have any emotion in the trade. It's saying, hey, it's following my predetermined plan that I have in place.
Right. And it either works or it doesn't, right?
That's right.
Because I trade from a series of trades perspective. I don't know what each individual trade is going to do. This is the way the pros do it, by the way. This is thinking like a pro. You want to make consistent money, this is the way you're going to have to think. Otherwise, you already know what the problems are. Trading will take on a quality of being exasperating, because you can see the potential, and it seems like you're always just like that close from getting it, and you never get there. How we feel, our state of mind, in any given situation is always real and the absolute truth. Now, I want you to make a distinction here. At any given moment, we're in a state of mind. State of mind could be any number of things. We have a lot of ways to define states of mind. It could be a state of mind of like satisfaction, dissatisfaction, happiness, joy, fear, terror. These are all states of mind. Confidence is a state of mind. As a state of mind, confidence, when I'm confident, I feel compelled to step into a situation. It thrusts me forward into an experience. Of course, if I'm fearful, then what am I doing? I'm pulling back because I feel threatened in some way. I'm perceiving the information that's available in that moment as threatening. But you got to remember, for me to perceive it that way, it means I'm interpreting it that way. Here's where people get real mixed up about this sort of thing. Is that the state of mind that we experience in any given moment is always the absolute truth. You can't deny the fact that if I'm feeling fearful right now, then I'm feeling fearful. That's just the way that it is. I'm in that state of mind. The particular interpretation that got me into that state of mind, however, could be completely dysfunctional. You guys with me on this? The interpretation that comes from what we believe could be completely dysfunctional. You see, as passive technical traders, if we believe that somehow or another our methodology is telling us what's going to happen next on any particular trade, the reason why we're having problems is because that is a dysfunctional belief. It was never true. Now, the states of mind that result from that belief are real. So, for an example, if I put on a trade and it turns out to be a winner, I think that I'm right. And as a result, I feel great. If I put on a trade and I think that I lose, well, then I feel like crap because I was wrong. The reality is neither one was really true, because when you win, you weren't right, and when you're wrong, you weren't wrong. Because whatever reason you had to put on the trade in the first place, again, had almost no correlation to what actually happened with the market. In other words, why the market did what it did. You just happened to put on a trade at that time that worked. And all technical patterns do, technical indicators, price patterns, is get you into a situation where there's a likelihood that when you get into that trade, it'll work. That's all they were ever represented to be. You understand what I'm saying? That's all they were ever represented to be. I'm not saying they don't get, screwed up somehow in terms of the way people represent them, but that's all that basically they ever were. It's not on a trade-by-trade basis. Now we're going to get into the last part of it. We're heading down to the home stretch, guys. Heading down to the home stretch. Are we all right up to this point? As far as anybody have any questions about fear and confidence and the relationships that we're talking about? That what we're talking about is the fact that we've got to, if we want to think like a pro so that we can experience the kind of results that the pros get, which are consistent, it means that we have to change our perspective from trade by trade to series of trades. Does anybody have any questions about that and why that's essential? So if you know that, why do we have to go to a series of trades perspective? Why? Well, hold on one second, sir.
You're taking all the fear out of it, and you know that through a series you'll be right more of the time than you will be wrong. And you take all the fear out of it and just work on that basis without any emotion.
Correct. And why isn't there any emotion? Give me specifically why you think there's no emotion.
Well, you're doing it out of more of a mathematical concept and not, I think it's going to do this. You're taking it's either going to be right or it's going to be wrong, and you either walk away or stay in it.
I want you to use the words expectations in your answer, okay?
I don't really have any. I don't have any expectations. It's either going to work or it's not.
Yeah, in other words, this particular trade, you don't know what you think something's going to happen, but you don't know what.
Right.
When you put money in a slot machine and push the button, you think something's going to happen, but you don't know what. And if it comes out to be the jackpot, well, hey, that feels great. You're surprised, right? When I put on a trade, I feel the same way. Literally, I don't know. I don't have to know. I just have to do what I need to do to make money on a consistent basis, which means I have to take every one of these trades. I can't pick and choose. The only reason why I pick and choose is because I think I'm right. So when you change your perspective from a trade by trade to a series of trades, it automatically manages your expectations in a positive way. I'm going to set this up for you as an exercise in a little bit, okay? But I just want to make sure we're anybody else have any questions about any of this? So you know, so in other words, what we're doing what are we doing at this point then? So you know where you want to go, right? So do we know where we want to go? We want to get to a point where we are actually changing the way that we think. When you walked in here this morning, you didn't think like a pro, did you? Now you have some idea of what it means to think like a pro, right? Come on, yes or no? Come on, guys, give me some response. Okay. How are we going to get there? Now we might understand it. How are we going to get there? Well, the paper trading, yeah, well, yeah, sort of, but yeah, I'm not saying you just have the answers. I'm saying we got to have a way to get there, right? We have to have a series of steps to be able to get to this particular mindset, because what we're really talking about here is we're talking about changing the way that we think. Now, that can have some profound implications, right? No one seems to like to change the way that they think. Most traders have to go through the process. Remember this morning, the common thread between all traders who end up, being really successful is that they end up having to lose one or more fortunes, or what they defined as a fortune, to get to that point. It's because the process of losing caused them to change the way that they think about trading. Now, do you want to do this the hard way, or do you want to do it the easy way?
Easy way.
Okay, I'm getting some response here. Good. The easy way, right. We want to do it the easy way. So this is what this is all about now. This is what the last part of the workshop is about. It's about doing it the easy way.
Hard knocks.
What's that?
Hard knocks.
Right, there you go. How do we change? Oh, that's a good question, right? That's a real good one. How do we change? A lot of theories. A lot of techniques about it, a lot of theories on techniques. As far as I'm concerned, change is really a function of, well, you can break down to a series of steps, but really change is really a function of desire. When you get right down, remember how we took price movement and boiled it down and distilled it down to simply what? Price movement, all price movement is a function of what? Imbalance and conviction between buyers and sellers. All change is a function of desire. If the desire is there, you'll find a way to facilitate the change. And it really doesn't matter what the technique is. Honest to God, it really doesn't. I'll give you an example right here. Probably one of the most extreme examples I could come up with. You can, by the way, what I'm going to read you right now, I got off of Yahoo. And you can go Google this kid and find out more about him yourself, okay? But as I read this to you, keep in mind how this kid accomplished this. Because the scientists that investigate this, they don't know. They can't figure it out. To me, it's easy. The kid's desire was so intense that he managed to find a way. This is Lincoln, Nebraska. Bryce Mellon is a whiz at video games such as Mortal Kombat. Is anybody familiar with Mortal Kombat? I'm not into video games, so well, not those video games anyway. Mortal Kombat, okay? Got some people. Is this a tough game? Yeah?
It's challenging.
Challenging, okay. In that regard, the 17-year-old, and he's a little older now, this was a couple of years ago. In that regard, the 17-year-old isn't much different from so many others his age. Except for one thing. He's blind. And as he easily dispatched foes who took him on recently at a Lincoln Gaming Center, the affable and smiling Bryce remained humble. I can't say that I'm a superhero, he said, working the controller like an extension of his body. I can be beat. Those bold enough to challenge him weren't so lucky. One by one, while playing Soul Calibur 2, which is another game, their video characters were decapitated, eviscerated, and without mercy by Bryce's on-screen alter ego. I'm getting bored, Bryce said in jest as he won game after game. Blind since birth, when his optic nerve didn't connect because of Leiber's disease, Bryce honed his video skills over the years through patient and not so patient playing, memorizing key joystick operations and moves in certain games while asking lots of questions, paying particular attention to audio cues. He worked his way up from games such as Space Invaders and Asteroids into modern combat games. I guess I don't know how I do it, really, Bryce said as he continued playing while facing away from the screen. Facing away from the screen. It's beyond me. I'm just quoting him. Bryce knows this much. He started playing at home when he was about 7. He enjoyed trying to play, but he wasn't very good at first, said his father Larry, but he just kept trying. He broke a lot of controllers. When the questions of broken controllers comes up, Bryce flashes a smile and just shrugs. I used to have quite a temper, he said. Me and controllers didn't get along very well. Now we get along just fine. While playing Soul Calibur 2, Bryce worked his way through the introductory screens with ease, knowing exactly what to click to start the game he wanted. He rarely asked for help. Once the game started, he didn't need any help. How do I move an exasperated opponent, Ryan O'Banion asked, while doing battle, which his character was frozen in place. You can't, Bryce answered before finishing him off. That's what happens. That's why I don't play him, O'Banion said after his blood-spattered character's corpse vanishes from the screen. How Bryce became so good is a mystery to his father. He just sat there and he tried until he got it right, Larry Mellon said. He can't ever complain to me or anyone else about how hard it was. Bryce hangs out any chance he gets at the Dog Tags Gaming Center in Lincoln, opened last month. Every now and then, someone will come in and think that he can beat the blind kid. That attitude doesn't faze Brian. I'll challenge them maybe if I feel like a challenge, he said, displaying an infectious confidence. I freak people out by playing facing backwards. There's nothing he likes better than playing video games. He will be a senior in high school next year after graduation. He plans a year off because he wants a break from school. And when he goes to college, he wants to study, what else? Video game design. This is just an extreme example, but I think a really good one, that all change is a function of desire. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to do it. If you want to be able to think in probabilities because you want to be consistently successful, you will find a way to do it. I'm going to give you ways, but what I'm saying is that you will find a way. If you don't, then it's that simple. You won't. It's like almost every, let's put it, the traders, when I was doing coaching, the traders that I worked with fell into the 2 basic categories, and there almost wasn't anybody in between. The first category would be traders who were already consistently successful. They already knew how to win, and what they wanted was fine-tuning. So they'd go to a trading coach like myself to find some really creative ways, let's say, to fine-tune themselves where they can actually make more money than what they were already making. And then the other category was desperation and I'll do anything. The I'll do anything. Everyone in between, no way. And even the all do anything wasn't always sincere. Sometimes it was just lip service. Change is also a function of the degree to which we change, is also a function of the clarity of your intent. In other words, you can have the desire, but your intent has to be really clear. Because when you think about the whole concept of changing, what you're really saying is that I'm willing to let go of a certain portion of my identity, in a way. Of some part of myself that, I obviously operated out of for X number of years or months or whatever, maybe put a lot of energy into, and you got to be willing to let that go. Is it even possible to change a belief? How about it? Is it possible to change a belief? Yes. I mean, it happens all the time, does it not? Yes. Is there anybody in the room who did not grow up, like this is just a simple example, a simple illustration. Is there anybody in the room who did not grow up with a belief in Santa Claus? Is it most everybody did? Just an example. If you believed at some point in your life in Santa Claus, where's that belief now? What happened to it? What happened to that portion of your identity? Because if we were all children, if we were all 4 and 5 years old, and someone knocked on that door and said Santa Claus is out in the lobby, we'd probably be jumping over each other to get there, right? And it was that belief, the energy inside of that belief would compel us to express ourselves in a particular way, a way that was consistent with the belief. If I believed in Santa Claus and someone said and gave me information, said Santa Claus is in the lobby, I'm going to be jumping over these tables to get there. as a 4-year-old. Now, as an adult, someone knocked on the door and said Santa Claus is in the lobby. I'm sure I'd just ignore him. Where did my belief in Santa Claus go? What happened to it?
Just let it go.
Yeah, I don't know the underlying. I mean, really, I can't say that I know the underlying dynamics of how that energy got transformed. But I can say it doesn't exist inside of my mental environment any longer in a way that would compel me to express myself like I did believe in Santa Claus. In other words, there's no more energy there. I can remember when I did believe it. I could say to myself, yeah, there's something, or maybe even something there even now, but not enough for me to go running out into the lobby. You can say before you walked in here that you might have had a real strong belief that whatever you used to determine your edge gave you that edge on a trade-by-trade basis. In other words, I wouldn't be putting on this trade if I didn't think I was right. Now you can say to yourself, are you willing to let that go? The only way you're going to be willing to let it go, to even generate the desire to let it go, is if you're really clear about your intent. Hopefully I've given you enough insight to be really clear about your intent as to why you might want to let this go. Because it's just going to create frustration. If you like trading on a random basis, then great. Then stay on a trade-by-trade basis. And trade randomly, because it is fun. You'll win, you'll have winning streaks, but I can assure you without a shadow of a doubt that you trade randomly and you are setting yourself up for catastrophic losses. Because anything you do could result in a win, and most of the things people end up doing are just the kind of things that set themselves up for a catastrophic loss. Because you are reinforcing inappropriate behaviors. On a trade, when you trade randomly on a trade-by-trade basis, you are reinforcing inappropriate behaviors. Those inappropriate behaviors, namely, are not predefining your risk is the biggest one. You get into a trade, you don't predefine your risk, and you win. You're going to do it again. You're going to do it again until you get hit with a huge loss. And sometimes those are really hard to recover from. And in fact, for most people, they're almost impossible. Not that you can't, it's just that they just don't have the resources for it, nor do they have the desire or the inclination to do it. They just walk away. Are you relatively clear about why you would want to do this? Why you'd want to go from a trade-by-trade to a series of trades perspective? Sincerity. See, you need the desire, you need the clarity, and you need the sincerity. It can't be lip service. It has to be real. It has to be authentic. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say to you that based on my experience, if you're clear, if the desire is there, it's genuine, the clarity of your purpose is there, it's unconflicted, and so the sincerity is there, it will virtually happen automatically. That is the technique for change. What most people, the problem is that with most people, it takes usually a series. Let's say it takes using various techniques that are available, that have been created and thought up, that over a period of years they finally get to the point where they have the real desire, they have the clarity, and the real sincerity is there. And once all those are in place, the change happens automatically. And they would think that it happened over a period of years using techniques, but the reality is it just clicked into that. Just finally, the whole thing clicked into that one point where it's all there, like the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, a good example would be about what I'm talking about in terms of how clear you have to be in some cases, because some of the energy that you want to move out in terms of a conflicting or dysfunctional belief, it could be really strong energy. I mean, it could be pretty substantial. When you think about it, I mean, there are traders that I worked with many years ago especially that were really, I mean, hardcore technicians. I mean, these are really hardcore guys that just, I'm not even going to mention the techniques they use, but, it's like, well, I'll get, like Elliott wave casualties. I mean, they were guys that were just, there was a time in the late 80s and early 90s where a lot of my off-the-floor traders were what I call Elliott wave casualties. And, because these are guys who just, who love to analyze. And, when they start understanding the difference between analysis and execution and also the underlying dynamics of the market, it's like they had to get to a point where the realization that they'd spent 10 years or 8 years and thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on analysis and workshops and seminars when none of it was, or very little of it was really necessary. I mean, they had to reconcile all that stuff, and that wasn't an easy thing to do. That wasn't an easy thing to let go of. It wasn't an easy thing to say, okay, it was all right. I know what I need to know now, and, But how do you know what real clarity of intent is? Imagine yourself being held underwater. Imagine yourself being held underwater. And as your air starts to run out, second by second, it gets to the point where you believe that if you don't get a breath of air right now, you're going to drown. That is a point at which every fiber of your mental being is aligned 100% with your desire for that next breath of air. There's no conflict. There's no hesitation. There isn't anything that argues inside of you for anything else other than that next breath of air. If you want to make money bad enough, in other words, if you want to be able to make the kind of income that you can rely on as a trader, then your desire to switch to this series of trades approach has to be greater than any resistance that you might have to stay in a trade-by-trade approach. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. It does.
Degree of conviction. I just basically gave you that too. How much energy is behind your desire. Energy moves prices in the market. I mean, what moves prices? An imbalance in conviction. What does conviction imply? Conviction implies energy. Energy. I am not going to bid a price up to a next highest level unless I think I know what the hell I'm doing and that I can make the market go further, or someone else is going to come in and help me out. I have to have conviction to do the opposite of what it takes to make money, meaning buy high instead of buy low, or sell low instead of sell high. My conviction in the future has to be greater than the guy on the other side of the trade. Conviction moves prices. Conviction will move energy inside your mental environment. Focused thought will move energy out of dysfunctional beliefs. And that's basically what we're talking about. We're talking about clarity of intent, desire. That is focused thought. You know exactly where you want to go. You want to get to the point where you believe that there's a random distribution between wins and losses, that anything can happen, that you don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money. And that's the big one. I don't need to know what's going to happen next to make money. If you understand the benefits of installing those beliefs inside your mental environment as a core component of your trading personality, then you will find a way to do it. I'm going to give you away, but self-discipline. Self-discipline I define as simply making a conscious commitment to pay attention to what you are thinking, saying, or doing in relationship to what you're trying to accomplish in any given moment. In other words, if, for an example, I have a goal or a desire or an objective, a desire to transform myself into someone who can think like a professional trader, someone who thinks in a series of trades perspective, someone who believes in the random distribution between wins and losses in my series, and I also know that, I may have any number of conflicting beliefs that I've acquired over the years that say otherwise, that say, even though I'm aware of the benefits of this, there's all these other beliefs that say this isn't true. This is not who I am. This is who I am right here. He seems to be making a lot of sense up here, but you know something? This is who I am. You want to transform yourself into someone who thinks this. You can use self-discipline as a technique, which is simply my objective is to think in a series of trades perspective, start monitoring your thoughts, your words, or your actions to see that they're consistent with what it is that you want to accomplish. And then simply purposefully refocus when you find out that you're saying, doing, or thinking something that's opposite or not consistent with what you desire. And just constantly refocus. Eventually you'll get to the point where you are that person. A real good example of employing self-discipline is back in the late 70s, I decided I want to become a runner. And I can't tell you why, because I don't remember the reason why. I just got it in my brain that I wanted to do it. Now back when I was a kid, in high school and college, I was very active, played a lot of sports. But from that point on, my lifestyle was such that I ended up becoming somewhat of a slug. And I say a slug, just, I watched a lot of, my primary vocation other than working was watching TV. And so when I decided that, I wanted to become a runner, what did I do? I went out and ran. And I found out that I couldn't. I say I couldn't, I literally couldn't. I was shocked and astounded as to how out of shape I was. I couldn't even run 2 blocks. And so, I went out the next day and only could run 2 blocks again. I thought, oh my God. And then I didn't run again for probably 6 months. And so when I ran again, I at least had enough desire to compel me to run more than a couple of days. And I found something out is that I was amazed at how fast your body adapts and improves. And so that gave me a lot of encouragement because, I ran a couple of times and I ran the 3rd and 4th time and it's like I ran so much further like the 4th, 3rd or 4th time. I'm thinking that gave me a lot of encouragement to think, okay, I can do this. And so I set this goal for myself that this was like in May, I don't remember, May of 1979 or 1978. I really don't remember. Anyway, but I set this goal for myself that I wanted to be able to run 5 miles by the end of the summer. And at the time, it seemed insurmountable. It really did. It didn't seem like it was even remotely possible to me, but that was my goal. And so I went out and, being kind of a methodical person, I went out and I bought a journal, a running journal, and a stopwatch, and of course the running shoes and all this kind of good stuff. And so set out to just start running, and immediately ran into a set of obstacles. And those obstacles had to do with like it wasn't a part of my identity, because every time I said, okay, I'm going to go and go running, okay, I'm going to go run. Well, what do you think happened? All these conflicting and competing thoughts flooded my brain like, okay, it's too hot, it's too cold, I ran 3 or 4 days ago, nobody I know, none of my friends are doing this, it might rain, and the biggest one, of course, was, I'll go after this program. And of course, I never went. So I would say that out of all the times that when I said I want to run, I would say that I managed to actually get my shoes on and get out the door maybe 30% of the time. Okay? But that 30% of the time, I was improving, okay? And I was actually getting further and further and getting encouraged. But I realized as as I could run further and further, like I was up to a mile maybe, or a mile and a quarter or something, because I marked it all off in terms of like every half mile kind of thing of the course that I did. So I realized that I was getting so enthused over the fact that I was even getting that far that I thought I needed a mechanism to get the 5 miles, because I thought I'd quit. What I mean I thought I'd quit is that if I got to 2 miles, that was so far beyond what I thought I could ever do anyway, that what would compel me to go to 5? And so I don't know why I thought that way, but that's what I did. I really did. So I established what I called the 5-mile rule. And the 5-mile rule was, if I managed to get through all my conflicting and competing thoughts, and if I managed to get through those and actually get my shoes on and get outside and take one step forward, that I had to always run at least one step further than I did the time before. And I knew what that was because I kept the journal. I knew exactly where I stopped. So my rule was, I always had to go, I could go more than one step, but I had to be at least one step. And what I found, and this was really interesting, because what I found is that there was a threshold. There was a certain threshold point at which all the conflicting and competing thoughts went away, and it was like I became a runner. It was like I didn't have to force myself to go out and run anymore. I actually felt compelled to run. And in a sense, what I did was create a new sense of identity. Like some people might call it a habit or whatever. I just call it a new sense of identity. I actually established a belief that said, I am a runner. That's who I am. You see, it's like it was people, and then my friends and family, they all thought that I was really disciplined. Because that's what I say about, most people think discipline is a personality characteristic. I don't define it that way at all. I define it as simply a technique for change. Because when we see somebody doing something that we can't do, that we'd like to do, but we have a problem with it, we just naturally think that they have the same kind of problems and that they're being disciplined in doing it. And that's not the case at all. If you're doing something effortlessly, it's because it's who you are. There was a threshold point, like I said, where all the conflicting energy just completely dissipated. And instead of me having to consciously say to myself, oh, I'm going to go out and run, I actually felt compelled to run. Then I got to the 5 miles, and then I got to the point where I was running so much that I actually had to establish a corollary belief to learn how to listen to my body, because there were days where my body was basically saying, hey, this is not a good day to run, and give yourself a rest. And that had to be all right. But for a while it wasn't, because when you start injuring yourself, then you know you're overdoing it. So I actually had to establish a belief that it was all right not to run. So it went from conflicting and competing thoughts to, this is who I am. And now it's effortless. Completely effortless. There's no conflict at all. That's what you're going to have to learn, or that's what you're going to learn how to do with your trading. You're going to learn how to put on a sample size of trades where it becomes completely effortless, where there's no conflicting or competing thoughts about what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it. It wouldn't even occur to you to make the kind of mistakes that you typically make now. That's what you want to do. You want to get to the point where it doesn't even occur to you. It doesn't even enter your brain. Does everybody understand that example? And like I said, when you realize that you're not appropriately focused on your objective, meaning you notice that you're either thinking, saying, or doing something that's inconsistent with what you're trying to accomplish, you deliberately refocus your attention on the object of your goal. Just do the best you can. Okay. So basically, like I said, this whole section, this last section is giving you steps and techniques for evolving into a professional trader's mindset. So what you want to do is you want to resolve. In other words, say to yourself, my desire is to be a certain way so that I can make a consistent income from my trading, something I can rely on. So I resolve to stop analyzing or trying to figure out if the current opportunity put on a trade is going to work. Resolve to stop doing that. And when you find yourself doing it, consciously refocus your thoughts that analyzing is not beneficial in any way. As a passive technical trader, you are dependent on the behavior of the traders to make your trade a winner. And you are using a mathematical formula or price pattern to predict what they will do. Math formulas or price patterns don't know the intentions, objectives, or reasons why the individual traders who are capable of moving prices behave the way they do. As a result, you will almost never know the real reason why any particular trade worked or not. There's nothing to analyze. There's just nothing to analyze. Nothing. There was back when I was in commercial casualty sales, there was a sales course that I bought by Zig Ziglar. Everybody know who Zig Ziglar is? Okay. And there was a part of this sales course where Zig Ziglar was talking about the exact right moment to ask a closing question to close a sale. And he said he's trying to get people to understand when that right moment is. And when you know where you're at that right moment, Zig Ziglar paused and there was silence. And then he screamed, "Shut up!" He screamed out much louder than that. "Shut up. The first person who talks loses." In other words, when you ask that closing question as a salesman, shut up and don't say a word, because if he said the first one who talks loses, and that was the truth. That worked. I found when I felt compelled to talk before he did, I didn't get the sale. And when I was able to keep my mouth shut and let them talk first, I did. What I'm saying to you is that when you get a signal from your methodology, stop thinking. There's nothing to think about. There's nothing to think about. Do you understand why I said that? Just put on the trade. There's absolutely nothing to think about. Just put the trade on. So you resolve to stop analyzing, okay? I resolve. I'm not going to analyze anymore. When I get a signal, I'm going to stop thinking. Resolve to learn the skill of trading without fear. In other words, manage your expectations by discarding the trade-by-trade approach in favor of a series of trades approach. This is what we've been talking about for probably the last half an hour. The pitfalls of a trade-by-trade perspective. Anything you do for any reason could result in a winning trade. The problem is many of the things that you could do that results in a winning trade could reinforce trading behaviors that could lead to a catastrophic loss. Losing streaks can easily cause one's attitude to deteriorate into a negative spiral when you trade in a trade-by-trade perspective. From a trade-by-trade perspective, you are making a choice to pick what you think is an edge out of all the other possible trades you could have picked. In essence, you are saying, I am picking this trade because I think it's going to work. When you trade in a trade-by-trade perspective, you can't help but think you know what's going to happen next because you are picking trades that you think are going to work. And therefore, your expectations automatically will not be in line with the realities of the market from its perspective. And therefore will have the potential to define and interpret market information in a threatening way, therefore causing your perception of that information to be all out of whack, and you're going to end up creating the very things you want to avoid, which is lose and make money, or lose and be wrong. You guys with me on this?
Yes.
The reality is at a rational level, you don't know if any trade is going to work because you never know for sure who's participating and what their intent is. You're guessing. See, you know what traders is? An educated guess. This is what we do as traders. Edge. Got an edge. You-cated. Guess. That means probabilities. You're making an educated guess. You've got the probabilities in your favor. That's all we're doing here. With a specific expectation of the outcome, any market information that doesn't conform to what you expect will be perceived as threatening. You will be trading with fear. If you win, you think you're right, and if you lose, you think you're wrong. In either case, you'll be setting yourself up to make a trading error on the next trade. Just think about what I just said. Regardless of what happens, if you're right, or if you're wrong, in either case, you're setting yourself up to make a trading error on the next trade. Because our minds have the natural tendency to connect the past with the present. If the trade was a winner, in other words, if you're trading in a trade-by-trade perspective, and you think you were right because you won, in other words, whatever reason you use, the market seemed to validate that reason. We know now that that just is not the case. If the trade was a winner, we're susceptible to, on the next trade, not predefining the risk. Well, the last one was a winner. I knew for that reason. I knew what was happening. Therefore, the risk doesn't exist. Not letting ourselves get stopped out of a loser. Jumping the gun because you're anticipating the signal. Over trading our position size. Not booking any profits because you think it's going to go on forever. Is this making sense to everybody? If the trade was a loser, you're susceptible to not predefining the risk because you're going to gather all the information that's necessary to make sure it's not going to be a loser this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't be putting it on. Right? You're going to analyze it to death. You're going to hesitate, get in late, or not get in at all. Take profits too soon, or revenge trading by not booking any profits. In other words, whatever the market's given you ain't enough. I got to have more. The last trade was a loser. I got to have more. The benefits of a series of trades perspective. You know exactly what behaviors serve your purpose and what behaviors do not. You cannot trade in a series of trades perspective with a trading plan and not know exactly what behaviors will serve your purpose and what behaviors will not. Because everything's planned out. You're either following your plan or you're not. But the point is, everything is planned. You are not picking individual trades, therefore, no one trade has any more or any less significance than the other. The next trade, this trade, they're all just trades. None of them have any more or any less significance. You will gain a sense of freedom to flow in and out of your trades without conflict because you are not living or dying on the outcome of any particular trade. By reducing the number of variables, you will be learning what works and what doesn't. By truly accepting that the outcome of this trade could be different than whatever happened the last time, you are positively managing your expectations. Now think about what I just said. By truly accepting. What does it mean to truly accept? It means that there's no other part of your identity or consciousness that is in conflict with accepting the fact, genuinely accepting the fact, that this trade could have a different outcome than the last one. If the last trade was a winner, it means that this trade could have a different outcome. It could be a loser. If the last trade was a loser, it means that this trade could have a different outcome. It could be a winner. You see, our minds don't feel like there's anything wrong with you by thinking in the previous way, because our minds are wired to think that way. Our minds are literally wired to connect the two. That's why it's so difficult for many people to break through into this ability to think in probabilities and to break into this threshold of consistency. Is because we're working in some cases against natural wiring. It is natural for our minds to say, if this is what happened the last time, if the circumstances are identical or similar this time, then the same thing is going to happen. What I'm saying to you is that you have to step into an exercise where you consciously disconnect the two. In other words, your whole purpose is to disconnect this now moment from what happened the last time. Because there is no connection. The reality is there's no connection. That's the truth. You just can't let your mind think that there is a connection. There is no connection between between the outcome of this now moment opportunity with what happened the last time, even though the variables that are getting you into this trade or identifying this opportunity are identical. That creates quite a paradox for our brains, okay? That's why people can understand the nature of probabilities. They can understand them, but they can't function from that perspective. You have to train your mind to function from that perspective. That's what separates everyone from the pros. Okay? You have to train your mind to disconnect. Don't let yourself think that there's any connection between now and what happened the last time. Because the reality is there is none. There really isn't. I don't care how identical it looks. You can use the same mathematical formulas and criteria in those formulas that apply to market data and come up with these patterns, but I guarantee you the traders that are operating in the market now are not the same traders, identically at least not the same traders as the ones that operated the last time. Therefore, there's no possible way that there could be a connection between now and then. There's just no possible way. When you disconnect, when you make that disconnection, okay, you won't perceive market information as threatening. You'll eliminate the potential to make a trading error, and you will be aspiring to trade without fear in a carefree state of mind. Now that you understand that your technical methodology does not tell you what will happen next on a trade-by-trade basis, in this section, I will take you through a step-by-step process that will integrate the principles of consistency as a functional part of your trading personality. Up to this point, we've talked about how we get into this mindset, about resolving to think in certain ways, but this is learning how to disconnect. In other words, learning how to circumvent that natural mechanism in our mind that automatically connects things, connects similar events, this now moment opportunity, this now moment event, with something that's in our mind as a memory. If there's enough, if there's enough similarity there, it'll tap us into a state of mind that's identical to our memories, as opposed to what might be available in the now moment, which may be very different than very different than what we think that it is. I mean, that's where we have relationship problems, communication problems. It's like this connect mechanism really does cause us a lot of problems. It really does, because in many cases, a lot of the pain and heartache that we feel in our lives is not connected at all with what's really happening in that moment, but you wouldn't be able to convince ourselves, or no one would be able to convince us, or wouldn't be able to convince ourselves that what we weren't experiencing in that moment wasn't real, because what we were experiencing was the energy. It was the fear, the confidence, the dissatisfaction, the betrayal. The energy of it is real, that you can't say this is not what's happening. But the problem is that the interpretation of the information that tapped us into the state of mind, and the connection that our mind automatically made from this now moment to some memory in the past, could be, like I said, completely erroneous. When you look at the very nature of the universe and the way it exists, there is no possible way that any moment could ever duplicate itself. No two moments are ever alike, ever. And could never be. Because if you just look at it, if you look at physical reality, it's constructed of atoms and molecules, and those atoms and molecules are in constant motion. They are in constant motion. For two moments to ever duplicate themselves, it means that all the atoms of all the molecules would have to be in the exact same spot they were in some previous moment right now. And that ain't going to happen. So when you really get right down to it, every moment is really unique. Every moment in the environment is really unique. But our minds don't process information that way. Every moment in the market is genuinely and truly unique, but our minds don't process it that way. We have to train our minds to process it that way if we want to make ourselves the casino. If we want to put ourselves in the situation where we are the casino, then we got to get our minds to process information in a different way. Richard had a comment that I thought was really good.
We tend to associate with a winning trade or a losing trade. That when we do suffer a loss, we tend to think of ourselves as a loser instead of that is just a trade that turned out a loss.
Right.
And when we do get a winning trade, we think, well, I'm a winner. So you get caught up in the emotion of it instead of looking at it, that was a bad trade, this was a good trade. It has nothing to do with whether or not you're a winner or a loser.
Richard, have you ever played the slots?
No.
Never?
Well, yes.
Why couldn't you say?
Yes,
Go ahead.
not anymore because
No,
I
no,
understand.
I didn't say, no. Did I say, have you ever played
Yes.
the slots?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When the tumblers didn't come up with any kind of a jackpot, did you think of yourself as a loser?
No,
Why?
because I know that the slot machine is rigged against me.
Well, okay, but did you think there's any possibility of ever winning?
Absolutely, because I did get some,
In
but
other words-
eventually ended up with an empty pocket.
But in other words, you walked into it with the belief that on any particular time that you pushed the button that there was a random outcome.
Correct.
You knew that, right? And so therefore you didn't think of yourself as a loser.
Correct. Not.
Have you ever thought of yourself as a loser when you had a losing trade?
Yes,
And what would be the reason?
because I lost.
No, because you
The
didn't
trade.
because you didn't believe that there was a random outcome, right? If someone told you from the very beginning that whatever outcomes that you experience from any methodology that you picked to define an edge were random, would you be thinking about this completely differently?
It makes a big difference. Absolutely.
So in other words, you wouldn't have the same emotional problems that you might have with the kind of errors and everything else that goes along with trading with fear if someone would have just said to you, you know what, there's a random outcome.
That would
Even
help.
though it's a pattern and it doesn't make sense and it creates a paradox for our minds, we got a pattern that produces a random outcome. If you believe that there was a random outcome, where would the emotions come from?
They would certainly diminish if not.
Well, they
go
wouldn't
away.
be. I don't think they'd be anywhere at all,
They
would
go
they?
away. Yes.
No, I'm saying if you just right from the very start, what would you
Right.
have to associate with? If it's a random outcome, then you know that you're not wrong, right?
Correct.
So there wouldn't be anything to associate the outcome with any kind of interpretation that could end up causing you to feel some sort of emotional pain.
You're right.
All we're trying to do is get to that place now, even though you've had all this backlog of experience telling you otherwise. That's where we want to get to. How are we going to get there? We're going to create an exercise. Remember the 5-mile rule? Okay, we're going to do the 5-mile rule in a trading exercise. Why are we going to do the exercise? Remember, we have to have clarity of intent. What is our desire? Our desire is to become a consistently successful trader, one where I can generate an income I can rely on. Okay? And so we are going to actually trade for a new reason. We're going to stay focused in the process of trading as opposed to the outcome. The typical trader is obsessed with the outcome of a trade. The professional trader is focused in the process of trading and letting the outcomes take care of themselves. As a matter of fact, the best traders that I've ever encountered love the process of trading. The typical trader, on the other hand, either has no awareness of the actual process of trading or really doesn't like the process of trading, but they're addicted to or obsessed with the outcome. So you have to make up your mind, and everyone in this room at some point in their lives, for some reason, has decided to make up their mind about something, and when you have, you got results. I know everyone has had that experience. You've made up your mind with so much desire, so much clarity of intent, and with absolute sincerity that you got the desired result. So I'm saying that if you make up your mind to trade for a new reason, the reason is the acquisition of skills as opposed to the outcome or how much money you're making, you will acquire those skills, and then you'll find that the outcomes just take care of themselves. If you've paper traded or tested your methodology to the point where you have confidence that you have something that can generate consistent results, then you can do this exercise. If you haven't, then you're going to have to do that first. You're going to have to plan your trades. In other words, you're going to have to take your methodology and determine a given set of rigid variables, because what we're going to do is set up a trading exercise with just a simple 25 trade or 20 trade sample size. In other words, what you're going to say is that I am willing to invest in the development of these skills, the skill of learning to trade without fear, learning to think in probabilities. Because when you learn to think in probabilities, the fear will go away. And so what I essentially have to do is convince myself. I have to purposefully step into an experience where I am convinced, where I literally convince myself that these principles are true. Now, they sound true to you. They might resonate as the truth, but you have to keep in mind that you might have a backlog of any number of experiences that would support beliefs that would argue otherwise. Because I could say to you that if I set up or you set up an exercise where you said, okay, I've got a particular set of variables that when they appear in the market, that is my edge, and that my edge will produce, let's say, even 60% winning trades. And you don't even have to have 60%. You can have 50% and still make consistent money. As long as what you have to risk to find out if it works is, a third or a half of what you normally get when the trade does work in terms of profits. But if we set this exercise up so that there's no wiggle room, there is no wiggle room. What I mean by wiggle room is that the variables, the criteria that you use are absolutely rigid, black and white. They're either present or they are not. That's the only decision you have to make. In other words, if you do it in terms of lights, whatever lights you're going to use, whatever time frame, the lights you're going to use in whatever time frame, they are either on or they're not. And if they're on, you are obligated to take the trade. And what you're going to say to yourself is that in this whatever criteria or plan that you set up is, I am not going to take just the next trade. I am going to take the next 20 trades. You are committing yourself to taking the next 20 trades of the occurrence of your edge. You will know in advance, based on testing and paper trading, exactly the optimum amount that you have to risk. In other words, what your risk is on each trade. And it's not going to be a varied amount. It's going to be a specific amount, whether it's in terms of dollars or distance. It will be a specific amount so that you know exactly how much each trade is going to potentially could cost you. And it should really be set up as a rigid profit potential too. In other words, I don't want you making subjective decisions as to about how far you're going to let the market go in your favor. So if you can get a set of variables, well, let's say you even 2 to 1 or even 1.5 to 1, 1.5 to 1, meaning that if I have to risk 1 point of something, even if it's, let's say, in stocks, if I have to risk $1 to make that my particular set of variables, my entry variables, will get me into a trade where if I risk $1, I'll get $2 60% of the time or 50% of the time. Then that's what you do. You do 2 to 1. There are trading methodologies that can be even the opposite. You can even go 2 to 1 here, meaning you can risk 2 to get 1, but in these cases the trade has to be 80 or 90% correct. You can do it any percentages you want as long as it is fixed. There is no wiggle room. There is no subjective decision making whatsoever. Am I really clear about this? There is no subjective decision making whatsoever. Go ahead.
The big things in expectancy or in trading with risk-reward ratio is you don't know which trade is going to be the winning trade.
Correct.
And typically you try to let your winning trade get stopped out on your winning trades. But what you're saying to us for this exercise is that we take a fixed stop. I understand the fixed risk, but a fixed, essential profit stop.
You know what? If you can set it up as a trailing stop, if you can set your trailing stops up where you're not making any kind of subjective decision, you can do that too.
So it doesn't matter as long as it's defined.
If you're sophisticated enough to do that, then yes. Okay. Most traders in these situations are not. That's why I make it real easy. Okay. As long as you're not making any decisions. So in other words, what you're saying is that if the market goes X number of points in my favor, I move my trailing stop up to a certain percentage below where the market is right now. And you don't move that unless you get stopped out or it moves up another gradient or whatever. Another, what am I thinking? Standard like deviation beyond. Yeah, okay, whatever you're using, okay? Yeah, if you can do that, that's fine. I just want all the variables to be completely and absolutely fixed. Okay? And then you fixed all these variables, and so you say to yourself, I'm going to take the next 20 trades. Not just the next one, but the next 20. No matter what. No matter what. Now that means that you have to be prepared based on the amount that you have to risk. You have to be prepared to take 20 losses in a row. The likelihood of that happening is about as remote as getting 20 wins in a row. But the point is that the dollar value of the risk of each trade multiplied by 20, you have to be able to afford. So you've got to set it up that way. You've got to set it up so that you can afford the dollar value of the risk of taking 20 losing trades in a row. Because what you're saying to yourself, if taking the risk, if taking the 20 trades in a row, losing 20 trades in a row based on the amount of shares that you trade. So for an example, if the standard amount of shares that you trade would say that, if I had lost 20 trades in a row based on how much I've got to risk, it's going to be $5,000. You say to yourself, you know what, I don't want to spend $5,000 on this. Then don't. But say I'm truly willing to spend, let's say $1,000. Then set it up where the amount of contracts or shares that you trade correspond to adding each one up where it comes up to $1,000. Even if it means just trading 10 shares at a time. Go down to a level where you're completely comfortable with the dollar value. You have to be completely comfortable. And then, when you get an occurrence of your edge, put the trade on and see what happens. And if it turns out to be a winner, you think, oh, hey, yeah, Mark Douglas, hey, good, hey, this is all right, okay? Yeah. So this one turns out to be a winner, and maybe this one turns out to be a winner. And maybe, well, this one's a loser. You think, okay, I can handle that. And this one's a loser? Uh-oh, and this one's a loser. Now we've got 3 losers in a row. I have rarely met a trader who doesn't have a problem with the next trade after 3 losers in a row. You made the commitment to take every single trade. When the next one comes up and your mind is screaming, no, it's a loser. Remember how our minds are wired to think? Our minds are wired to think that way, but that is not the truth. The truth is, your methodology, the mathematical formula, does not know what the outcome of that trade is going to be. And neither do you. You got to take it anyway. And see, And when these occurrences, when you purposefully put yourself into a situation where you're confronting these conflicting beliefs, because that's what's rearing its head. This is any different than me saying, I want to go run, and then well, after that program, or it's too cold, it's too hot, it's raining, whatever. It's the exact same thing. You put the trade on anyway, and it turns out to be a winner, you are convincing yourself that you don't know what's going to happen next. Because you created an experience that directly contradicts what you thought was true. You actually created an experience that directly contradicts what you thought was true. And the more of these you run into, and the more times you do it, all of a sudden, you're not thinking the old way anymore. You are truly and genuinely learning how to think in probabilities. You are integrating thinking in probabilities as a core part of your trading personality. You may understand the nature of probabilities, but now you're being able to function from a probabilistic perspective. Because what you're going to do is you're going to do this exercise until you can do it flawlessly. You are going to do this exercise, and you do the first one, and if you don't execute your trades completely flawlessly, then do it again. Now, at the end of a sample size, if you don't like the outcome, if you don't like the results, meaning the amount of money that you made, or even lost for that matter, because that's possible, you don't like the bottom line, you can tweak your variables. You just can't do it in the middle of a sample size. If you want to change your variables at the end of a sample size, you're free to do it. You cannot do it in the middle of one. Cannot. Absolutely cannot. You will keep doing this exercise until when? What? What?
Until you're consistent.
Well, yes, but there's something else I want to get. Until when? How do you know you've arrived? How do you know you've actually arrived, that you've changed?
That you can freely and easily put in the trade.
That's right. You can there's no conflicting energy anymore. It doesn't occur to you to not do it. It doesn't even enter your brain. You don't even get the thought. You get a signal, you put on the trade. You get a signal, you put on the trade. It's like then it's who you are. You guys with me on this? You managed to actually work through all that conflicting energy, and you've changed. You're a different person. Because the competing and conflicting thoughts don't even enter your consciousness. They're not there anymore. Because it's not who you are anymore. Any questions about this? Is this making sense to everybody? If you're really sincere about wanting to generate a consistent income, you'll do this exercise. And if you're not, you won't. And you might not be ready to, and that's all right. Whenever you're ready, you'll do it. But this will work. This will work. One second. Because you are actively stepping into an experience where your desire is to change the way that you think. Instead of avoiding the confrontation, you are actually embracing the confrontation. Big difference. You are embracing the confrontation. Because the more that you embrace it, the faster it dissipates. Go ahead.
Can you speak a little bit about going from paper trading to real money? I know there's a difference, and you would say you were trying a new strategy or something that you were tweaking. You would do paper first, and what would you consider it? I mean, if would you look at each trade, and if you executed it flawlessly, and you say you generated money, and then you went to real money, how would you decide? I guess if you lost money, to answer my own question here, in other words, what would you expect the transition to be?
Well, that's going to depend on the individual. One, you're always going to want a paper trade. If you've got a new set of variables that you're working with, you're always going to want to paper trade it to the point where you're confident that you can get good results. That doesn't mean that you can execute good results. It means that the potential is there. You want to know the potential is there, correct? Once you know that the potential is there, then you move. See, the paper trading part is only to find out what variables in the market work in relationship to, like market movement in relationship to the formula, okay? Now we're working on our brain, okay? That's the first step. The second step is that do I think in a way that's consistent that I can extract the maximum potential out of the methodology? That means executing flawlessly. So what you do is you set this exercise up in a way that what'll dictate it is how much you're comfortable with how much you're comfortable with the dollar amount of losing every single trade. That's how you know how to set it up. That's really key. It really is. It means that if you have to trade one share, then if that's all you're comfortable with losing, based on the dollar value of how much you have to risk on each trade. That's based on your analysis, by the way. Then do it. And then when you can execute one share flawlessly over a sample size or one or two sample sizes, then go to 10 shares and see how you do. And if you can't do 10 shares comfortably and flawlessly, go back to 5. You're just building skills. If you get your mind out of the money, out of the outcome part, and focus on building the skills, once those skills are there, you're going to make all the money you want. That makes sense, doesn't it? Do this exercise and you won't believe how things will change. Until you actually change, and it'll be amazing. Do the exercise. So does anybody else have any questions about how to set this exercise up? How long are you going to do the exercise? If you set it up and do it, how long are you going to do it? What's the criteria?
20 trades.
I understand. How many 20 trade sample size or 25 trade sample size exercises are you going to do? That's right, till there's no conflicting and competing thoughts, until you can do it flawlessly, until you can do it, until it's like just a part of who you are. It wouldn't occur to you not to do anything other than what your rules say. It just wouldn't even occur to you. It doesn't even enter your brain. And I guarantee you, at that point, you will be thinking in probabilities. You will be trading without fear. You will be trading from a carefree state of mind. That's the payoff. You'll be thinking like a pro. So you want to resolve to focus your efforts on developing specific trading skills, and consistent profits will naturally flow as a byproduct of the mastery of these skills. The most successful traders love the process of trading, whereas a typical trader usually ignores the process because he's obsessively focused on the outcome.
On these trades, you keep saying, do the process, and until you do it perfectly. Right. What are some of the pitfalls? I mean, when I trade, I don't really think that I'm doing too much wrong. So I'm curious what all can go wrong on a trade other than typing it in wrong.
All the things like all the errors that I mentioned earlier, like not predefining errors. If you're not doing stuff wrong, that's fine. That's don't more. Don't add stuff. Yeah, don't make it. Yeah, don't. If you're doing all right, then you're doing fine. Okay. I don't want to give you the impression that there has to be anything more there. It's, Okay, resolve to commit the 5 fundamental truths about the nature of trading as core beliefs of your trading personality. Those 5 fundamental truths are anything can happen. Is that true or not?
Yes.
Every moment is unique. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. An edge is nothing more than an indication of a higher probability of one thing happening over another. Okay. Is there a random distribution between wins and losses on any given set of variables that define an edge? Yes, absolutely. Do we need to know what's going to happen next to produce a consistent income? No. You see, so if you find yourself, as you're doing this exercise, with conflicting and competing thoughts, pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're about to do as a result of what you're thinking, and then refocus on what you want to believe. I want to believe that anything can happen, that there's a random distribution that I don't need to know, and just stay focused on these particular beliefs and do the best you can and keep on doing it until it just becomes a part of who you are.
Sounds like a meditation.
It's right. You're absolutely right. It's like a meditation.
Your mantra.
That's right, your mantra. Put them up on your wall or by your computer screen. Because they're all true. Resolve to continually reinforce a belief in your ability to be a consistently successful trader by adopting the trader's creed. By the way, these two things are in trading in the zone. The 5 fundamental truths and the trader's creed are both in trading in the zone. The trader's creed, I am a consistent winner. In other words, remember the belief that I put up that I am a runner? Remember that? I said when I actually became a runner, that belief compelled me to express myself in a way that was consistent with that belief? Well, what we want to do is install a belief that says, I am a consistent winner. And the subset beliefs that you have to make this true will automatically compel you to act or behave in a way that's consistent with that belief. Why are you a consistent winner? Because I objectively identify my edges. Objectively, meaning no rationalizations, justifications, or building cases. I know what criteria defines my edge, and it's either present or it's not. I predefine the risk of every trade. Wouldn't even think about getting into a trade without doing that. Now, that doesn't mean, because who brought that up earlier? No, he's not here right now. That doesn't mean that I always put a stop in the market. But I trade subjectively. That doesn't mean I actually enter a stop. But I guarantee you that whatever price I picked as my risk point, I never violate not getting out at that price. The market hits my price, I get out. That doesn't mean I've entered a stop in the market beforehand. But I could do that. I don't have a problem with that. It wouldn't even occur to me not to do otherwise. I'm a consistent winner because I completely accept the risk, or I'm willing to scale back or let go of the edge. Meaning I'm completely free of conflict about the amount of money I'm willing to spend to find out if this trade is going to work. If you're not completely sure, or let's say completely without conflict about the amount of money that it could take to find out if this trade is going to work, then scale back to a level that you're comfortable. But the important thing is participate. Even if you have to scale back again to, like I said, 1 share, at least you're participating at a level where you've got some money at risk. I act on my edges without reservation or hesitation. I am a consistent winner because I act on my edges without reservation or hesitation. I'm a consistent winner because I continually monitor my susceptibility to making trading errors. And how do I do that? I keep journals. I pay myself as the market makes money available to me. I subscribe to a philosophy of scaling out of positions. I like to divide my position up into fractions and scale out in quarters or thirds. That way I'm continually making myself a winner. As the market makes money available, I'm extracting money out of the market because I don't know how far the market's going to go in my favor. And what I have is I usually have at least a quarter or a third on in case it just does something that, I could have never anticipated. And by the time I've got just the last third on or last quarter on anyway, and I've got a trailing stop, or at least a place in my mind where I get out if it retraces back to my not far beyond my entry point anyway from that point on. And the last one, I never violate these principles of success. Well, what do you think, guys? Any questions? Get them now. Go ahead.
Do you ever scale in?
No, I know a lot of traders who do. I just don't. That's it. I'm not saying that just because I don't doesn't mean that I don't think it's fine. I just don't have a particular methodology where I scale in. That's all. I get in all at once. Anything else? Here's your chance to get on the DVD. Come on. Don't miss out. What's that?
Never violate and walk on
Well, no. Why? What do you mean? That you think? Well, what do you? Yeah, you don't have to. You can get to a. Go ahead.
Never violate. The never is it that they said never say never.
Well, let's put it this way: you can at least aspire to never violate the principle. Yeah, that's good, but that's a good point. Yeah, you're making a good point. You really are. I appreciate that. You can aspire to never violate these principles of success.